Imagine, if you can, a state before the tick of the first second, an expanse beyond the concept of before. In this fathomless, silent eternity, where time itself was yet an unformed thought, only God existed. Not a God who began, for beginnings are anchors in the river of time, but a God who is an infinite, uncaused being, the very essence from which all origins would spring. He was not a creation. He was, and is, and always will be the Creator, the uncreated source of everything that would ever be. The void was absolute, a canvas of pure, undifferentiated potential held within his boundless consciousness. Then, from the heart of this timeless stillness, a decision, an intention, stirred. A thought, potent and divine, prepared to unfurl, with a voice that was not sound as we comprehend it, but a vibration that resonated through the very fabric of non-existence. God spoke, "Let there be light." The command was not a mere wish, but an act of pure will, an eruption of unimaginable power. Instantly, a blinding, glorious brilliance tore through the void, an incandescent dawn that banished the utter blackness. This was not the gentle light of a distant star, but the raw, untamed energy of creation itself, a torrent of photons painting the nascent universe with hues of unimaginable splendor. The heavens, like a majestic scroll, unfurled, stretching into an immensity that defied comprehension, sprinkled with the seeds of galaxies yet to coalesce. And from this cosmic ballet, the Earth emerged, a sphere of raw potential, at first cloaked in swirling mists and tumultuous oceans, its landscapes barren, awaiting the artist's touch. God surveyed this symphony of emergent matter and energy, his gaze encompassing the swirling nebulae and the cooling crust of the young planet. A profound quiet settled, the silence not of emptiness but of contemplation. In this divine pause, he conceived the pinnacle of his terrestrial creation. "Let us make humankind in our image, after our likeness," he mused, a declaration filled with a tenderness that contrasted with the raw power of cosmic birth. With an artist's infinite care and a father's profound love, he reached down to the virgin soil. From the dust of the newly formed earth, warmed by the primal light, he sculpted a being, breathing into its form not just air, but a spark of his own essence, an awareness, a capacity for emotion, reason, and relationship. Adam, he declared, the name echoing with the promise of life. And the man, sculpted from earth yet bearing the divine imprint, opened his eyes. He blinked, and the universe, freshly born, vibrant with color and life, flooded his senses. He saw the lushness of a world untouched by decay, heard the music of winds and waters, felt the warmth of the new sun on his skin. Yet, amidst this breathtaking panorama, a subtle ache resonated within him, an unspoken question in his innocent gaze. Something was missing. God, in his infinite perception, saw the flicker of solitude in Adam's eyes, the unformed yearning for a connection that mirrored his own relational nature. "It is not good that the man should be alone," he resolved, his voice a gentle whisper of compassion that rippled through the perfect garden he had prepared. And so, as a profound peace settled over Adam, a sleep deeper than any he would know again, God acted. He took from Adam's side, from near his heart, a rib, and from this element of man, he fashioned another being, not a lesser copy, but a complement, a completion, Eve. Upon waking, Adam's eyes fell upon her, and the world, already a wonder, seemed to explode with new meaning. A gasp of pure, unadulterated astonishment escaped him. "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh," he exclaimed, his voice rich with a joy that resonated through the verdant paradise. He was unable to look away, captivated by her presence. Eve, her eyes reflecting the dawn of her own consciousness, gazed back, a beautiful blend of innocent curiosity and profound wonder dancing within them, the reflection of an unexplored world, a shared destiny. They stood together, two souls in perfect harmony, in a garden named Eden, a sanctuary of unparalleled beauty, where life thrived in effortless abundance. Crystal-clear rivers meandered through meadows, bursting with flowers of every conceivable color. Trees laden with luscious, life-giving fruit offered their bounty freely, and creatures great and small lived in gentle accord. But even in this idyllic haven, a shadow was beginning to lengthen, unseen by the innocent pair. Lurking in the deeper, cooler parts of the garden, where the sunlight filtered less brightly, a cunning intelligence watched, its ancient eyes gleaming with a malevolent intent. The serpent, a creature of subtle beauty, yet imbued with a chilling craftiness, slithered with an almost hypnotic grace, its scales shimmering like dark jewels. It approached Eve, its voice a silken whisper, smooth and deceptively reasonable, designed to bypass innocence and plant a seed of disquiet. "Did God really say," it began, its tone feigned surprise, "you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" The question was a masterstroke of insinuation, designed to make God's generous provision seem like an arbitrary restriction. Eve, her heart untroubled by deceit, hesitated for a moment, the question causing the faintest ripple in her serene world. She replied, her voice clear and honest. "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say, 'You must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die.'" She repeated the warning faithfully, yet the serpent saw its opening. "You will not certainly die." The serpent's voice grew more intense, its silken tones now laced with an irresistible seduction, a promise of forbidden power. "For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." The words hung in the air, a tantalizing lure, like God, knowing. The desire to grasp this forbidden knowledge, to transcend her current state, ignited like a spark in Eve's innocent heart. The fruit itself, gleaming and beautiful, suddenly seemed irresistible. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly, plucked the fruit, and took a bite. A strange new sensation, a thrill mixed with a dawning unease, coursed through her. Then she offered it to Adam, who stood beside her, and he, without apparent hesitation, also ate. In that instant, the very fabric of their reality tore. A profound, chilling awareness crashed down upon them. They saw each other, not with the pure, unashamed innocence of before, but with eyes that now understood nakedness and a scorching shame, an emotion utterly alien until that moment, flooded their beings. The garden itself seemed to recoil. The vibrant colors dulled, the joyful songs of birds faltered, and the sky, once a brilliant azure, began to darken ominously as thunder, low and menacing, rumbled in the distance. Then a presence, majestic and sorrowful, filled the garden. God appeared, his countenance not radiating the gentle warmth they had always known, but a mixture of profound pain and righteous fury. "What have you done, Adam?" His voice, though not raised in a shout, resounded like a celestial hammer blow, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. Adam, trembling, his newfound shame a heavy cloak, could only point a shaking finger towards Eve. "The woman you put here with mesh gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it." Eve, tears streaming down her face, her voice a broken murmur, whispered, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." The verdict was swift, its implications devastating and far-reaching, echoing into the future of all humanity. "Cursed is the ground because of you," God declared to Adam, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Through painful toil you will eat food from it all the days of your life." To Eve, he said, "I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor you will give birth to children." The serpent, the instigator, was sentenced to crawl on its belly, an emblem of its debasement, and to eat dust. The exquisite harmony of Eden, the perfect communion between God and humanity, and between humanity and creation, was shattered, perhaps forever. Expelled from paradise, Adam and Eve stepped out from beneath the protective canopy of the garden, facing a world that now seemed harsh, unfamiliar, and filled with unknown perils. As they walked away, their hearts heavy with regret and a dawning fear, the vibrant hues of Eden faded from their view. The first sunset they witnessed outside that sanctuary was stained a deep, sorrowful red, a sky weeping for a lost innocence. The creation of the universe, a saga filled with unparalleled wonders, had now been indelibly marked by tragedy, setting the stage for an eternal story of struggle, the desperate need for redemption, and the enduring, resilient flame of hope. Beyond the now guarded gates of Eden, the world that greeted Adam and Eve was a stark contrast to the gentle paradise they had known. The sun, which once warmed them with benevolent rays, now beat down with a harsher intensity on the arid plains stretching eastward. Thorns and thistles, once absent from their idyllic existence, now seemed to spring from the cursed ground, a constant reminder of their transgression and the toil that would define their days. Yet, amidst the struggle for survival, life, in its persistent, miraculous way, continued. Adam and Eve, bound together by their shared loss and a love forged in the crucible of a new, harder reality, brought forth children. 2 sons were born to them. Cain, the firstborn, a tiller of the soil, whose brow was often furrowed with the effort of wresting sustenance from the reluctant earth, and Abel, his younger brother, a keeper of flocks, whose spirit seemed to carry a lighter, more contemplative air as he led his sheep across the whispering grasslands, his face often lit by a quiet peace that was a stranger to Cain. The brothers grew, each developing distinct personalities shaped by their labor and their relationship with the divine. Cain, strong and pragmatic, poured his sweat into the land, his offerings to God consisting of the fruits of his arduous toil, grains, vegetables, the best of his harvest. Abel, more introspective, offered the firstborn lambs from his flock, carefully selecting the choicest, unblemished animals, his heart seemingly more attuned to the unseen. One day, a palpable tension arose. God, in his sovereign wisdom, showed favor to Abel and his offering, but to Cain and his offering he did not. The reason remained unspoken, a mystery that gnawed at Cain's heart. A dark cloud of resentment began to gather within him. Abel, Cain's voice, sharp with a burgeoning bitterness, cut through the quiet air as they met near their respective fields. It seems God is pleased with you, with your fat lambs and your gentle prayers, but not with my offerings, not with the sweat of my brow. What is it that you possess, little brother, that I lack? His words were tinged with an envy that had begun to take root deep within his soul. Abel, while gently stroking the soft wool of one of his prize lambs, looked at his elder brother, his gaze filled not with pride, but with a gentle concern. "It is the heart, Cain," he replied, his voice calm and steady, yet carrying a profound truth. "God looks not merely at the gift, but at the heart of the giver, at the sincerity of our devotion." Abel's words, meant to enlighten, instead echoed in Cain's mind like a relentless, accusing drumbeat. Days bled into weeks, and the envy within Cain did not subside. Rather, it festered, growing like a poisonous vine, twisting his thoughts, darkening his spirit, casting a long, ominous shadow over his every action. He watched Abel, whose communion with God seemed so effortless, whose flocks prospered, and the disparity felt like a personal affront, a constant, burning injustice. One evening, as the vast expanse of the sky above was studded with 1,000,000 glittering stars, a cold, hard decision crystallized in Cain's heart. The shadow had consumed the light. He approached Abel, his eyes carefully veiling the tempest raging within. "Brother," he said, his voice unnervingly even, "come with me to the field tomorrow. There is something I wish to discuss, something important." Abel, unsuspecting, agreed, his trusting nature unable to fathom the darkness that had taken root in his brother's soul. At the break of dawn, as the first rays of sun painted the eastern horizon with hues of rose and gold, the 2 brothers met in the designated field. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, a palpable sense of impending doom that even the chirping birds seemed to sense, their songs muted and hesitant. "Why?" Cain's voice was a dangerous whisper, laced with a pain that had curdled into malice. "Why does God favor you, and not me? Why must I always be second?" Abel, still unaware of the precipice upon which their relationship stood, tried once more to reason with him. "It's about our faith, Cain, our willingness to offer the very best of ourselves, sincerely and without reservation. God desires a heart wholly devoted, not just the outward show of sacrifice." But Cain was beyond hearing. The calm of the dew-kissed field was suddenly brutally shattered. With a guttural cry, a sound torn from the depths of his tormented soul, Cain, his face contorted with rage and envy, lunged. In his hand, he gripped a heavy stone, a crude instrument of a passion that had become murderous. He struck Abel with savage force. Abel crumpled to the ground, his eyes wide with a horrifying mixture of surprise, disbelief, and excruciating pain. "Cain, my brother," he murmured, his voice a faint, fading whisper, before the light in his eyes was extinguished forever, his lifeblood soaking into the silent, unprotesting earth. The earth, which until that very moment had been a stage for life, for growth, for the innocent play of lambs and the rustle of ripening grain, now became the first unwilling witness to the oldest and most intimate of crimes, fratricide. Abel's innocent blood, dark and accusing, seeped into the soil, crying out, not in words, but in a silent, spiritual agony that pierced the very heavens, demanding justice. Cain stood frozen, the blood-stained stone falling from his trembling hand. Horror, stark and absolute, washed over him as the magnitude of his deed crashed down upon his conscience. The rage had momentarily vanished, replaced by a cold, sickening dread. Suddenly, a voice, not of this world, echoed in the chambers of his mind, strong, omnipotent, inescapable. "Cain, where is your brother Abel?" The question, though gentle, carried the weight of omniscience. Cain, his voice broken, choked with a desperate amalgam of fear and a dawning defiant guilt, stammered, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" It was a pathetic deflection, a hollow attempt to evade the unavoidable. But the divine voice, now stern and filled with righteous sorrow, declared, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand." In that instant, Cain's life was irrevocably altered. The very earth that had once yielded fruit under his diligent care now seemed to turn barren and hostile beneath his feet. He was marked not by a physical brand, but by the indelible stain of his sin, burdened with the terrible distinction of being the first murderer in human history. He became a restless wanderer, an outcast, forever haunted by the silent accusation in the wind and the memory of his brother's last pain-filled gaze. The tragedy of Cain and Abel was thus etched into the nascent heart of humanity, an everlasting sorrowful reminder of the destructive, insidious powers of envy, hatred, and the catastrophic consequences of a heart turned away from God. Time, an unrelenting river, flowed onward, but the shadow of sin cast by that first murder seemed to lengthen, to spread across the generations. Humanity multiplied, but with their numbers, wickedness also grew rampant. The earth became corrupt, filled with violence, deceit, and a pervasive disregard for the ways of their Creator. God, looking down upon the world he had made, a world now so grievously marred, felt a profound sorrow, a divine grief that shook the heavens. He saw the depravity, the darkness that had enveloped the hearts of men and women, and with a heavy heart, he resolved to put an end to the pervasive corruption, to cleanse the earth of its defilement. Yet, even in this pervasive darkness, one man stood apart, a solitary beacon of righteousness in a sea of iniquity: Noah. He walked faithfully with God, his life a stark contrast to the prevailing godlessness. The voice of God, deep and resonant as thunder, yet clear and intimate, broke into Noah's quiet life. "Noah," the voice declared, I have decided to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. So make yourself an ark of cypress wood, make rooms in it and coat it with pitch inside and out." The command was staggering, the implications immense. Yet Noah, his heart attuned to the divine will, did not hesitate. He obeyed. With unwavering faith and tireless determination, he began the monumental task. Every swing of his hammer, every meticulously shaped timber seemed to resonate not only with the effort of construction, but also as a somber judgment against the world's unrepentant corruption. His neighbors, steeped in their revelry and self-absorption, watched his efforts with derision. "Building a boat on dry land, Noah?" They jeered, their laughter dripping with scorn and disbelief. "Have you finally gone mad?" But Noah, his voice steady, his eyes filled with a sorrowful conviction, would reply, "Judgment is coming. Repent, for the Lord is merciful." But his warnings fell on deaf ears. Days turned into months, and months into long, arduous years. At long last, the colossal ark, a testament to one man's faith amidst a faithless generation, stood completed. The great ark stood complete, a silent, colossal monument of obedience on a landscape oblivious to its own impending doom. The scent of freshly cut cypress and molten pitch hung heavy in the air, a strange fragrance in a world teetering on the brink. Then the divine instruction came again, precise and urgent. "Go into the ark, you and your whole family," God commanded Noah, "because I have found you righteous in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of every kind of clean animal, a male and its mate, and 1 pair of every kind of unclean animal, a male and its mate, and also 7 pairs of every kind of bird, male and female, to keep their various kinds alive throughout the earth. 7 days from now I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will wipe from the face of the earth every living creature I have made." A profound sense of solemnity, mixed with an undercurrent of barely suppressed urgency, settled over Noah and his family. His wife, whose name has been lost to the mists of time, but whose steadfast support was surely his anchor, and his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, along with their wives. The tension was almost a physical presence as they began the incredible task of gathering the creatures. Led by an unseen force, a divine herding instinct, pairs of animals, from the smallest shrew to the towering giraffe, from the iridescent hummingbird to the majestic eagle, began to converge on the ark. A strange, silent procession it was, an almost dreamlike parade marching 2 by 2, or in 7s, up the wide ramp and into the cavernous, gopher-wood belly of the vessel. The air filled with a cacophony of sounds, the lowing of cattle, the bleating of sheep, the chirping of birds, the distant roar of a lion, all mingling into a chorus of impending change. Noah's neighbors, who had long since dismissed him as an eccentric fool, watched this bizarre spectacle with a mixture of amusement and perhaps, for a fleeting moment, a prickle of unease. But soon, their derision returned, louder than before, masking any nascent fear. Once the last creature was safely aboard, and Noah and his family had entered, the massive door of the ark, designed with divine precision, was shut. It wasn't Noah who sealed it from the inside. An unseen hand, the hand of God himself, closed it from the outside, a final, irrevocable act. A heavy, foreboding silence enveloped the earth, a stillness that was more terrifying than any storm. The sky, which had been an ordinary blue, began to shift. A strange, yellowish-grey pallor spread across the heavens, and the sun became a diffused, sickly orb. Then suddenly, the first drops fell. Not a gentle shower, but large, heavy drops, splattering against the dry, thirsty ground, against the pitched roof of the ark. At first, the people outside looked up with a detached curiosity, perhaps even a sense of relief from the oppressive stillness. But the drops became a sprinkle, the sprinkle a shower, and the shower an unrelenting, furious downpour. Panic, cold and sharp, began to slice through the complacency of the onlookers. The laughter died on their lips, replaced by gasps of dawning horror. Noah was right. A woman screamed, her voice cracking with terror, as the water began to pool around her ankles. A desperate, chaotic scramble ensued. Men, women and children, their faces contorted with fear, ran towards the ark, its dark, impervious form now, their only, impossible hope. They pounded desperately on the massive sealed doors, their cries a wretched symphony of regret and despair. "Let us in, Noah, let us in. We believe you now." But it was too late. The time for repentance had passed. The waters rose with terrifying swiftness, a relentless, churning tide. Rivers burst their banks, streams became raging torrents, and the great oceans themselves seemed to heave and swell, reclaiming the land. Cities, towns, mountains, all the familiar landmarks of their world were swallowed by the rising, insatiable flood. Inside the ark, Noah and his family listened to the terrifying tumult of divine judgment. The roar of the rain on the roof was deafening, the groaning of the ark's timbers, as it was lifted by the surging waters, a constant, unnerving sound. Through the small, high windows, they could see nothing but a world dissolving into a watery chaos. Their hearts were filled with a profound fear, a primal terror of the destructive power. But mingled with that fear was a sliver of hope, a fragile trust in the God who had promised to preserve them. "Father," one of Noah's sons, perhaps Japheth, his voice trembling, asked above the din, "Why us? Why have we been spared when so many perish?" Noah, his face etched with sorrow for the lost world, but also with a deep, unwavering faith, placed a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "Because, my son," he replied, his words imbued with a quiet gratitude and a sense of awe, "we found favor in his eyes, not because of our own perfection, but because of his grace. For 40 days and 40 nights, the rain did not cease. The floodgates of the heavens and the springs of the great deep seemed to have burst open in a cataclysmic, watery fury. The ark, a tiny vessel of life in an endless ocean of destruction, rose higher and higher upon the waters, floating aimlessly on a boundless grey sea. The desperate cries from outside had long since faded away, replaced by the eerie, monotonous sound of water, the creaking of wood, and the anxious breathing of its inhabitants. The world as they knew it had vanished, submerged beneath a liquid tomb. At last, after those 40 days and nights of relentless deluge, the rains stopped. But the waters remained, covering the highest mountains. For many more months, the ark drifted. Then, slowly, painstakingly, the waters began to recede. The ark, guided by the same unseen hand that had preserved it, finally came to rest gently on the slopes of Mount Ararat. A great, shuddering stillness descended. Noah, his heart pounding with a mixture of trepidation and burgeoning hope, carefully unlatched and opened a window. The air that wafted in was clean, washed, but carried no scent of familiar land. He released a raven, which flew back and forth until the waters had dried up from the earth. Then he sent out a dove to see if the water had receded from the surface of the ground. But the dove could find nowhere to perch because there was water over all the surface of the earth. So it returned to Noah in the ark. He waited 7 more days and again sent out the dove from the ark. When the dove returned to him in the evening, there in its beak was a freshly plucked olive leaf. "The land is dry," Noah announced, his voice choked with emotion, tears of relief and gratitude streaming down his weathered face. A cheer, weak at first, then growing in strength, erupted from his family. The long ordeal was nearing its end. God spoke again to Noah, his voice now gentle, filled with promise. "Come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring out every kind of living creature that is with you, the birds, the animals, and all the creatures that move along the ground, so they can multiply on the earth and be fruitful and increase in number on it." With hearts overflowing, Noah and his family disembarked, stepping onto a world scoured clean, a world reborn. The animals too emerged, blinking in the sunlight, stretching their limbs, and slowly dispersing to repopulate the renewed earth. Noah's first act on this new land was one of profound worship. He built an altar, his hands, though weary, moving with reverent purpose. He took some of all the clean animals and clean birds and offered burnt offerings on the altar. The aroma, a pleasing fragrance, ascended to heaven, and God, moved by this act of faithful worship, declared, "I establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be destroyed by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth." His voice echoed in the crisp, clean air, a promise of enduring mercy. "I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind." And as he spoke, a magnificent rainbow, a vibrant arc of breathtaking color, arched across the sky, a brilliant visual promise against the backdrop of the clearing clouds. It was a symbol of hope, of divine faithfulness, a bridge between judgment and grace. Noah and his family, standing on the renewed earth, their faces turned towards that glorious, multi-hued promise, looked to the future not with fear, but with a profound, tear-filled hope, knowing they had witnessed and survived the greatest judgment the earth had ever known, and that they were now stewards of a new beginning, under a covenant sealed by the very hand of God. Through the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives, God began the great work of repopulating the earth. Generations passed, and humanity, blessed by the divine mandate to be fruitful and multiply, spread across the lands, forming tribes and fledgling settlements. For a time, they were united, speaking a single language, their shared heritage, a common thread woven through their burgeoning societies. They journeyed eastward, a growing multitude, and eventually they found a vast, fertile plain in the land of Shinar, a place that seemed to offer boundless opportunity. It was here, on this sprawling expanse, that a new and audacious idea began to take root, an idea born not of humble gratitude, but of a burgeoning human pride. A charismatic and powerful leader named Nimrod, described as a mighty hunter before the Lord, rose to prominence among them. His ambition was as vast as the plain itself. "Come," he declared, his voice ringing with authority and a captivating vision that resonated with the people's growing sense of self-importance. "Let us build ourselves a city, and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." The proposal was met with enthusiastic accord. The desire to achieve greatness, to leave an indelible mark, to control their own destiny, and perhaps even to rival the divine, burned brightly within them. They had forgotten the lessons of the flood, or perhaps, in their arrogance, believed they could now secure themselves against any future calamity, divine or otherwise. The project commenced with a fervent, unified energy. "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly," they said to one another. And they used brick for stone and bitumen for mortar, a testament to their ingenuity and resourcefulness. Day after day, the sound of labor filled the plain. The shaping and firing of bricks, the mixing of mortar, the shouts of foremen, and the straining of countless hands. The city began to take shape, but it was the tower, the centerpiece of their ambition, that captured their collective imagination. It rose steadily, imposingly, a defiant finger pointing towards the sky, each new layer of brick a monument to their shared aspiration and their increasing self-reliance. "Higher!" Nimrod would command, his eyes gleaming with an almost feverish intensity as he surveyed the ever-ascending structure. "It must reach the firmament. Our name will echo through the ages." But in the heavens, God watched. He observed their unity, their shared language, their incredible focus, and the astonishing progress of their audacious endeavor. He saw not just a tower of brick and mortar, but a tower of human pride, a symbol of their desire to usurp divine prerogative, to make a name for themselves rather than to glorify their Creator. "Look," he said in the celestial council, "they are one people, and they have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. And now nothing that they propose to do, will be impossible for them. It was not a statement of admiration, but one of profound concern for the trajectory of human ambition, untethered from divine guidance. Suddenly, inexplicably to the busy workers below, the hum of concerted labor ceased. A stonemason, high on the scaffolding, called down for more bricks, but the reply he received from his trusted partner below was a stream of incomprehensible gibberish. "What did you say?" he yelled, his face etched with confusion and a flicker of annoyance. "I need bricks, not babble." The response was another torrent of unintelligible sounds, accompanied by equally confused and frustrated gestures. Panic began to ripple through the construction site. "What is happening?" shouted Nimrod, his voice, usually so commanding, now tinged with a dawning alarm as he tried to restore order. But his own words, once clear and authoritative, now fell on ears that could no longer understand his commands. The very tool of their unity, their shared language, had become the instrument of their division. Confusion spread like a wildfire, swift and devastating. Lifelong friends, brothers who had toiled side by side for years, now stared at each other with eyes full of bewilderment and a growing, helpless despair. A craftsman, attempting to explain a complex design to his apprentice, found his carefully chosen words dissolving into meaningless noise. The apprentice, in turn, tried to ask for clarification, only to produce a string of alien syllables. "I can't understand you, speak clearly," became the desperate, universal cry. But clarity was gone, shattered in an instant by a divine intervention. Communication, the bedrock of their collaborative effort, had crumbled into chaos. "Nimrod, do something," the people pleaded, turning to their once confident leader. But even his frantic gestures and impassioned shouts couldn't overcome the cacophony of 100 newly birthed tongues. An elderly man, his face pale with a reverent fear, sank to his knees. "God has punished us," he cried, his voice trembling. "Our pride has reached the heavens, and he has humbled us. We must scatter, or we will surely perish in our confusion." The work on the great tower halted abruptly, its ambitious spire left unfinished, a stark and silent testament to human hubris and divine judgment. The once unified groups of people, now irrevocably divided by the impenetrable barrier of language, began to drift apart. Entire families, clinging to the familiar sounds of their newly distinct tongues, set off in different directions, seeking new lands where they could understand and be understood, where they could rebuild a sense of community, however fractured. Nimrod, standing at the desolate base of his crumbling dream, surveyed the scene of his shattered ambition. The bustling city he had envisioned was now a place of confusion and dispersal. "This cannot be," he murmured, a hollow echo of his former confidence. Yet deep within, he knew he had been overcome by a power far greater, a wisdom far deeper than his own. From above, God watched the scattering, his voice echoing with both authority and a profound sorrow. "So it shall be. Humanity will multiply and fill the earth as I intended. But they will not forget the cost of their unbridled pride." The Tower of Babel, as it came to be known, became a ruin, a lasting, melancholic reminder of the day God confused the languages and scattered mankind across the face of the earth, ensuring that no single human endeavor could again so brazenly challenge the heavens. Centuries flowed by, nations rose and fell, civilizations blossomed and withered. Amidst the tapestry of human history, woven with threads of conflict, discovery, joy, and sorrow, God's divine purpose remained steadfast. He was preparing to choose a specific family, a lineage, through whom he would reveal himself in a more intimate way, a people who would eventually bring the promised Messiah, the ultimate Redeemer, into the world. In the bustling, idolatrous city of Ur of the Chaldees, a prosperous center of Mesopotamian civilization, lived a man named Abram, a descendant of Shem. One night, as the myriad stars shone with a particular brilliance in the clear desert sky, a voice, unlike any earthly sound, broke into the quietude of Abram's life. It was not a voice audible to the physical ear, but a profound, unmistakable impression upon his spirit, clearer and more powerful than the roar of any storm or the decree of any king. "Leave your native land," the voice commanded, "your father's household and your kindred, and go to the land that I will show you." The call was radical, demanding a complete uprooting from all that was familiar and secure. Then came the promise, a promise of such staggering scope that it seemed to dwarf the stars themselves. "I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." Abram's heart pounded fiercely within his chest. This was no mere dream, no fleeting fancy. This was the call of the Most High God. Doubt could have easily found fertile ground. He was not a young man, and his wife Sarai was barren. But in that moment, a seed of extraordinary faith took root. Without hesitation, his spirit resonating with a profound sense of awe and obedience, he replied, his inner voice clear and resolute, "Here I am, Lord, I will do as you will." The very next morning, as the sun cast its first golden rays over the ziggurats and dwellings of Ur, Abram shared the divine revelation with Sarai. "We are leaving," he stated, his voice firm, his eyes shining with a new and unshakable purpose. Sarai, taken aback, her mind struggling to comprehend the suddenness and magnitude of this decision, asked the practical, pressing question, "To where, Abram? Where are we to go?" Abram looked at her, his gaze filled with a calm resolve that belied the uncertainties ahead. "I do not know," he replied honestly, "but the Lord will guide us." The departure was swift, almost startlingly so. Abram, Sarai, their nephew Lot, and all their considerable possessions, their herds, their servants, the accumulated wealth of a lifetime, set off on a journey into the vast, unknown expanse. The familiar ziggurats of Ur, the bustling marketplaces, the well-trodden paths of their homeland were left behind. Before them stretched the daunting, sun-scorched desert, a path leading to a destiny yet unrevealed, guided only by a divine promise and the unwavering faith of one man. The journey from Ur of the Chaldees was an odyssey of faith, a testament to Abram's unwavering obedience. The caravan, a moving speck against the vast, indifferent landscape, pressed onward. Days melted into weeks, weeks into months. They traversed sun-baked plains where the horizon shimmered with heat hazes, navigated treacherous rocky defiles, and crossed arid wildernesses where water was more precious than gold. The comforts of Ur were a distant memory, replaced by the stark realities of nomadic life. The grit of sand in their food, the chill of desert nights, the constant vigilance against unseen dangers. Yet, through it all, Abram's resolve, fueled by the divine promise, did not waver. Sarai, though her heart must have often been heavy with uncertainty and the unspoken ache of her barrenness, walked beside him, her loyalty a quiet strength. Lot, his nephew, also a man of considerable flocks and herds, journeyed with them, his destiny intertwined for a time with that of his remarkable uncle. One night, while camped beneath a canopy of stars so brilliant they seemed almost close enough to touch, the voice of God spoke again to Abram, reaffirming his covenant amidst the desolation. "Look around you," the voice instructed, as Abram's gaze swept across the shadowy, sleeping forms of his camp and out towards the dark, silent land of Canaan that lay before them. "To your offspring I will give this land." Abram, standing there in the immensity of the wilderness, felt the profound weight and wonder of this divine pledge. This dusty, untamed land, inhabited by various Canaanite tribes, was to be the inheritance of a nation yet unborn, a nation that would spring from his own lineage. But the journey was not without its severe trials, tests that would stretch Abram's faith to its limits. Driven by a harsh famine that gripped Canaan, Abram was forced to lead his household down into the fertile, yet morally perilous, land of Egypt. Fearful that Sarai's striking beauty would endanger his own life, that the Egyptians might kill him to take her, Abram made a decision born of human frailty rather than divine trust. He instructed Sarai to say she was his sister, and indeed, when the Egyptian officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into his palace. Pharaoh, in his admiration for Sarai, and believing Abram to be her brother, treated Abram well, bestowing upon him sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys, menservants and maidservants, and camels. But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his household with serious diseases because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Pharaoh, discovering the truth, was incensed. "What is this you have done to me?" he demanded of Abram. "Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Take her and go." Shamed and rebuked, Abram and Sarai, along with all their possessions, were escorted out of Egypt, a stark lesson in the insufficiency of human cunning when pitted against divine purpose. Returning to Canaan, both Abram and Lot had prospered so greatly that the land could no longer support their vast herds and flocks side by side. Strife arose between their herdsmen. With characteristic generosity and a desire for peace, Abram said to Lot, "Let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herdsmen and mine, for we are close relatives. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left." Lot, looking out, chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan, which was well watered like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, toward Zoar. It was a choice based on outward appearance, leading him to pitch his tents near the wicked city of Sodom. Abram, meanwhile, settled in the land of Canaan, his faith once again tested by this separation and the less obviously fertile lands remaining to him. Yet, God's reassurance was swift and magnificent. After Lot had gone, the Lord said to Abram, "Look around from where you are, to the north and south, to the east and west. All the land that you see, I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Go, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you." And so Abram moved his tents and went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron, where he built an altar to the Lord, a constant act of worship and remembrance. Years continued to pass, marked by the rhythm of seasons, the growth of his herds, but not by the arrival of the promised heir. The weight of childlessness pressed heavily upon Sarai. Her faith, once perhaps as resilient as Abram's, began to fray under the relentless strain of waiting and the societal stigma of barrenness. In her despair, and perhaps influenced by the customs of the time, she made a proposal that would have far-reaching and complex consequences. "The Lord has kept me from having children," she said to Abram, her voice laced with a deep, weary sadness. "Go, sleep with my Egyptian maidservant Hagar. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Abram, perhaps weary himself, or seeing a human solution to a divine delay, agreed to Sarai's suggestion. From this union, Ishmael was born. When Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Sarai, in turn, embittered and jealous, mistreated Hagar, causing her to flee into the desert. There, an angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring, comforted her, and instructed her to return and submit to Sarai, promising that Ishmael too would become the father of a numerous nation, the Arab people, who would, in the unfolding scroll of history, often find themselves in conflict with the descendants of Abram's yet unborn promised son. Yet God had not forgotten his original, specific promise to Abram and Sarai. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him again, reaffirming the covenant and changing his name. "No longer will you be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations." And Sarai's name was changed to Sarah, meaning princess. Then came the most astounding pronouncement of all, "I will bless her, and will surely give you a son by her. I will bless her so that she will be the mother of nations. Kings of peoples will come from her." Abraham, overwhelmed, fell face down, and he laughed to himself as he thought, "Will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? The laughter was not entirely of disbelief, but of sheer, incredulous wonder at the sheer improbability, the divine audacity of it all. And as God had promised, so it came to pass. Against all human expectation, against the undeniable realities of advanced age, Sarah conceived and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him, a name meaning he laughs or laughter. Joy, pure and unadulterated, flooded the household of Abraham and Sarah. "God has brought me laughter," Sarah exclaimed, her voice brimming with a delight that was almost holy. "And everyone who hears about this will laugh with me." The cry of a newborn, so long awaited, now echoed through their tents, a tangible, miraculous fulfillment of a promise whispered under starry desert skies decades before. The call of Abraham, initiated in faith, tested by trials, and now crowned with miraculous fulfillment, marked not just the birth of a son, but the true beginning of a great nation, a chosen people. The divine promise extended not only to Abraham, but to his offspring through Isaac, a lineage that would indeed include kings and prophets, and would, in the fullness of time, culminate in the arrival of the Savior of the world. Isaac, the son of laughter and promise, grew up under the watchful eyes of his aged parents, Abraham and Sarah, in the land of Canaan. He was the cherished heir, the living embodiment of God's faithfulness. When the time came, Abraham, desiring a wife for Isaac from among their own kindred rather than from the Canaanite peoples, sent his most trusted servant back to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. Through a divinely orchestrated encounter at a well, the servant found Rebekah, a woman of beauty and kind spirit, who willingly agreed to return with him and become Isaac's wife. Their union was blessed, and after a period of barrenness for Rebekah, Isaac prayed to the Lord, and she conceived. Rebekah bore twin sons, Esau, the firstborn, a rugged, hairy outdoorsman, a skillful hunter, and his father's favorite, and Jacob, born grasping Esau's heel, a quieter man, content to stay among the tents, and his mother's favorite. The rivalry between the brothers began even in the womb and continued into their adult lives, fueled by their differing natures and parental favoritism. Esau, impulsive and driven by immediate gratification, one day returned from a hunting trip, famished and exhausted. He found Jacob cooking a savory lentil stew. "Quick, let me have some of that red stew, I'm famished," Esau demanded. Jacob, ever the opportunist, saw his chance. "First, sell me your birthright," he countered. The birthright, in that culture, carried significant spiritual and material privileges. Esau, dismissing its future value in the face of his present hunger, callously replied, "Look, I'm about to die. What good is the birthright to me?" And so, for a mere bowl of stew, Esau despised and sold his birthright to Jacob. Later, as Isaac grew old and his eyesight failed, Rebekah determined that her favored son Jacob should receive the special patriarchal blessing intended for the firstborn, orchestrated an elaborate deception. While Esau was out hunting game for his father, Rebekah disguised Jacob with Esau's clothes and goatskins on his hands and neck to mimic his brother's hairiness. Isaac, deceived by the feel and smell, bestowed upon Jacob the powerful blessing of prosperity, dominion, and divine favor. When Esau returned and discovered the trickery, he let out a bitter and anguished cry, his heart filled with a murderous rage towards Jacob. Fearing for Jacob's life, Rebekah urged him to flee to her brother Laban in Haran, the very place from which she had come. Jacob's flight was not just an escape, but a journey of profound spiritual encounter. Alone and desolate one night, using a stone for a pillow, he dreamed of a great stairway, or ladder, resting on the earth, with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And there above it stood the Lord, who reaffirmed the covenant promises made to Abraham and Isaac, assuring Jacob of his presence, protection, and the eventual inheritance of the land. Jacob awoke in awe, anointing the stone and naming the place Bethel, House of God, vowing that if God would be with him and bring him back safely, then the Lord would be his God. Jacob journeyed on to Haran and came to the household of his uncle Laban. There he fell in love with Laban's younger daughter, the beautiful Rachel. He agreed to work for Laban for 7 years in exchange for Rachel's hand. But Laban, a cunning and manipulative man, tricked Jacob on his wedding night, substituting his older, less favored daughter Leah for Rachel. Jacob, incensed by the deception, a taste of his own medicine, was forced to work another 7 years for Rachel, whom he truly loved. Through Leah, Rachel, and their respective maidservants, Bilhah and Zilpah, Jacob became the father of 12 sons: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and one daughter, Dinah. These 12 sons would become the progenitors of the 12 tribes of Israel. After many years of toil and enduring Laban's deceitful practices, Jacob, guided by God, decided to return to Canaan with his large family and considerable wealth in flocks and herds. The journey back was fraught with anxiety, particularly the impending reunion with Esau, whose anger he still feared. The night before their meeting, Jacob wrestled with a mysterious man until daybreak. When the man saw he could not overpower Jacob, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, and his hip was wrenched. "Let me go, for it is daybreak," the man said. But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man then asked his name, and upon hearing Jacob, he declared, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Jacob had been transformed, his name changed to signify his new identity as one who prevails with God. The reunion with Esau, much to Jacob's relief, was one of forgiveness and reconciliation. Among Jacob's 12 sons, his second to last, Joseph, born to his beloved Rachel in Jacob's old age, was his clear favorite. Jacob demonstrated this favoritism openly, most notably by gifting Joseph an ornate, richly embroidered coat of many colors. This special treatment, coupled with Joseph's youthful recounting of dreams that depicted his brothers and even his parents bowing down to him, ignited a burning envy and resentment in his older brothers. Their jealousy festered, growing into a bitter hatred. One day, when the brothers were grazing their flocks far from home, Jacob sent Joseph to check on them. Seeing him approaching from a distance, they conspired against him. "Here comes that dreamer," they sneered. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." Reuben, the eldest, hoping to spare Joseph's life, persuaded them not to shed his blood, but to throw him into an empty cistern in the wilderness, intending to rescue him later. So, when Joseph arrived, they stripped him of his ornate robe, the symbol of their father's favor and their own resentment, and callously threw him into the dry pit. Shortly thereafter, a caravan of Ishmaelite merchants, their camels laden with spices, balm, and myrrh on their way to Egypt, passed by. Judah, another brother, seeing an opportunity for profit and perhaps a way to avoid direct blood guilt, suggested, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. They pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. The brothers then callously dipped Joseph's beautiful coat in goat's blood and took it back to their grieving father, Jacob, with the deceitful tale that a wild animal had devoured him. Jacob, utterly heartbroken, mourned for his beloved son for many days. Refusing all comfort, his life plunged into a deep and inconsolable sorrow. Meanwhile, in Egypt, Joseph, though sold into slavery, was not abandoned by God. He was bought by Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. The Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered in Potiphar's household. Potiphar, seeing Joseph's integrity and competence, put him in charge of his entire household. However, Potiphar's wife, attracted to the handsome young Hebrew, repeatedly tried to seduce him. Joseph, steadfast in his loyalty to God and to his master, consistently refused her advances. One day, when she caught him by his cloak, demanding he lie with her, he fled, leaving his cloak in her hand. Spurned and furious, she falsely accused Joseph of attempting to rape her. Potiphar, enraged, had Joseph thrown into prison, the king's prison, where royal prisoners were confined. Even in the darkness and despair of the prison, the Lord was with Joseph. He found favor in the eyes of the prison warden, who soon put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners. While there, Joseph, gifted by God with the ability to interpret dreams, correctly interpreted the dreams of two of Pharaoh's officials who were imprisoned with him, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. To the cupbearer, he predicted restoration to his position. To the baker, execution. Both interpretations came true. Joseph asked the cupbearer to remember him to Pharaoh, but once restored, the cupbearer forgot. 2 long years passed, with Joseph languishing in prison, his hopes fading, yet his faith, though severely tested, endured. The stage was slowly being set for an even more dramatic turn in his extraordinary life, a turn that would not only elevate him, but also become the means of salvation for the very family that had betrayed him. 2 full years after Joseph had interpreted the dreams of the cupbearer and the baker, Pharaoh himself had 2 deeply disturbing dreams that none of his wise men or magicians in all of Egypt could interpret. In the first, 7 sleek, fat cows came up out of the Nile and grazed among the reeds, only to be devoured by 7 ugly, gaunt cows that followed them. In the second, 7 healthy, full heads of grain were swallowed by 7 thin, scorched heads of grain. Pharaoh awoke, his spirit troubled, the imagery of the dreams haunting him. It was then, in Pharaoh's distress, that the chief cupbearer finally remembered Joseph. "Today I recall my failings," he confessed to Pharaoh. "When I was in prison, a young Hebrew man, a servant of the captain of the guard, was there with us. We each had a dream, and he interpreted them for us. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them." Immediately, Pharaoh sent for Joseph. He was hurriedly brought from the dungeon, shaved, given fresh clothes, and presented before the most powerful ruler in the known world. "I have had a dream," Pharaoh said to Joseph, "and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." Joseph, with characteristic humility and reliance on God, replied, "I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." Pharaoh recounted his troubling dreams. After listening intently, Joseph, guided by divine insight, declared, "The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterward are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain, scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. There will come 7 years of great abundance throughout all the land of Egypt, but then 7 years of famine will follow, and the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten. The famine will ravage the land, so severe that the abundance will not be remembered because of the famine that follows." Then Joseph, demonstrating not only prophetic insight, but also profound wisdom and administrative capability, offered a plan. "Now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country, to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine." Pharaoh and all his officials were deeply impressed by Joseph's interpretation and his wise counsel. "Can we find anyone like this man?" Pharaoh declared, "one in whom is the Spirit of God." Turning to Joseph, Pharaoh said, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." With that, Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and people shouted before him, "Make way!" Thus, at the age of 30, Joseph, the betrayed Hebrew slave, the falsely accused prisoner, rose to become the vizier of Egypt, second only to Pharaoh himself. He was given an Egyptian name, Zaphenath-Paneah, and an Egyptian wife, Asenath, daughter of Potipherah, priest of On. During the 7 years of abundance, Joseph diligently oversaw the collection and storage of vast quantities of grain, so much that they stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure. Then, as Joseph had foretold, the 7 years of abundance came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to grip not only Egypt, but all the surrounding lands. The storehouses Joseph had filled became the salvation of Egypt, and indeed of many other nations. Back in Canaan, the famine was severe. Jacob, hearing that there was grain in Egypt, instructed his 10 older sons, "Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die." But he did not send Joseph's younger brother, Benjamin, with them, fearing that harm might come to him, the only remaining son of his beloved Rachel. So, the 10 brothers journeyed to Egypt, unaware that the powerful governor they would petition for grain was the very brother they had callously sold into slavery 2 decades earlier. When they arrived, they bowed down before Joseph with their faces to the ground, unwittingly fulfilling the very dreams that had fueled their youthful jealousy. Joseph recognized them instantly, but he concealed his identity, speaking harshly to them through an interpreter, accusing them of being spies. "No, my lord," they protested. "Your servants have come to buy food. We are all the sons of one man. We are honest men, not spies." To test them, and perhaps to see if their hearts had changed, Joseph devised a plan. He imprisoned them for 3 days, then released them, demanding they leave one brother, Simeon, behind as a hostage, and return with their youngest brother, Benjamin, to prove their story. He also secretly had their silver, which they had used to pay for the grain, returned to their sacks. The journey back to Canaan was filled with anxiety. When they discovered the silver in their sacks, they were terrified, believing God was punishing them. Upon reaching Jacob and recounting their ordeal, Jacob was distraught, especially at the demand to take Benjamin. "You have deprived me of my children," he lamented. "Joseph is no more, Simeon is no more, and now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me." Reuben offered his own 2 sons as a guarantee for Benjamin's safety, but Jacob refused. However, as the famine persisted and their grain ran out, Jacob, driven by desperation, reluctantly agreed to let Benjamin go, with Judah pledging his own life as surety for his youngest brother's safe return. They returned to Egypt with double the silver and gifts for the governor. This time, Joseph received them more kindly, inviting them to his home for a meal. When he saw Benjamin, his full brother, his emotions nearly overwhelmed him, and he had to withdraw to weep privately. During the meal, he seated them in order of their birth, which astonished them. He then orchestrated a final, dramatic test. He had his own silver divination cup secretly placed in Benjamin's sack of grain. As they were departing, he sent his steward after them to accuse them of stealing the cup. The cup was, of course, found in Benjamin's sack. The brothers, utterly devastated and tearing their clothes in despair, were brought back before Joseph. Judah, speaking for them all, offered themselves as Joseph's slaves, but Joseph insisted that only the one in whose sack the cup was found would be his slave. Judah then made an impassioned plea, recounting their father's deep love for Benjamin, the potential devastation of his loss, and offered himself as a slave in Benjamin's place. This selfless offer, this evidence of genuine change and concern for their father and youngest brother, finally broke through Joseph's carefully constructed reserve. He could no longer control his emotions. Ordering all his attendants to leave the room, Joseph, alone with his stunned and terrified brothers, wept aloud. The sound of Joseph's weeping, raw and unrestrained, filled the grand Egyptian chamber, echoing off the ornate walls. His brothers stood frozen, a mixture of terror and utter bewilderment etched on their faces. This powerful Egyptian governor, the man who held their lives and the fate of their families in his hands, was now overcome by an emotion so profound it seemed to shake the very foundations of his authority. What had Judah's desperate, heartfelt plea unleashed? Through his tears, Joseph finally spoke, his voice thick with an emotion that had been suppressed for over 2 decades. "I am Joseph," he declared, the words, spoken in their own Hebrew tongue, crashing down upon them with the force of a revelation. "Is my father still living?" The brothers were too stunned to answer, too overwhelmed by a tidal wave of shock, guilt, and dawning, unbelievable recognition. The man before them, clad in fine Egyptian linen, adorned with gold, wielding immense power, was the brother they had so cruelly betrayed, the boy they had sold into a life of slavery, the one whose dreams they had mocked. Their minds reeled, trying to reconcile the ragged shepherd boy with this imposing figure of authority. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through their shock. If this was indeed Joseph, what terrible vengeance awaited them? Seeing their terror, Joseph, his heart aching with a complex mix of sorrow for their past deed and an overwhelming love for his family, spoke again, his voice now gentler, seeking to reassure them. "Come close to me," he urged. Hesitantly, fearfully, they drew nearer. "I am your brother Joseph," he repeated, his gaze meeting each of theirs, "the one you sold into Egypt. And now, do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." His words were a balm, an astonishing declaration of forgiveness where they had expected only condemnation. He explained how the past 2 years of famine were but the beginning, with 5 more years of severe hardship yet to come, years in which there would be neither plowing nor reaping. "God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then, it was not you who sent me here, but God." Joseph's perspective was breathtaking in its scope. He saw not just their betrayal, but the overarching sovereign hand of God, weaving even their sinful actions into a tapestry of divine providence, a plan for the preservation of their entire family, the very lineage through which God's covenant promises would flow. Tears now streamed down the faces of his brothers as well, tears of relief, of shame, of an unutterable gratitude. Joseph embraced each of them, weeping over them, and they, in turn, wept on his shoulder, the heavy burden of their long-held guilt, beginning to lift in the warmth of his undeserved forgiveness. "Now hurry back to my father," Joseph instructed, his voice filled with urgency and love, "and say to him, 'This is what your son Joseph says. God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, don't delay. You shall live in the region of Goshen, and be near me, your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds, and all you have. I will provide for you there, because 5 years of famine are still to come. Otherwise, you and your household and all who belong to you will become destitute." He loaded them with provisions for the journey, wagons from Pharaoh to transport their families, and the finest gifts of Egypt. He gave each of them new sets of clothing, but to Benjamin he gave 300 shekels of silver and 5 sets of clothes, a special token for his beloved younger brother. The journey back to Canaan was a stark contrast to their previous fearful returns. Their hearts were light, their minds filled with the incredible news they carried. When they arrived and told Jacob, "Joseph is still alive. In fact, he is ruler of all Egypt," their father's heart was numb. He could not believe them. The news was too fantastical, too impossibly good to be true after so many years of bitter mourning. But when they relayed to him all the words Joseph had spoken, and when he saw the wagons Pharaoh had sent to carry him, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. A flicker of life, of hope, long extinguished, returned to his aged eyes. "I'm convinced," he exclaimed, his voice trembling with a joy he thought he would never feel again. "My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." And so Israel, as Jacob was now known, set out with all that he had. The entire clan, a company of 70 persons in all, including his sons, their wives, and their children, along with their flocks and herds, began the momentous journey to Egypt. It was an exodus in reverse, a journey not out of bondage, but into a place of provision and reunion, guided by the unseen hand of God. When they reached Beersheba, on the border of the Promised Land, Jacob offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to Israel in a vision at night, "Jacob, Jacob." "Here I am," he replied. "I am God, the God of your father," he said. "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will surely bring you back again. And Joseph's own hand will close your eyes." This divine reassurance steeled Jacob's resolve, transforming any lingering apprehension into eager anticipation. When they finally arrived in the fertile land of Goshen, a region in the Nile Delta, well suited for their pastoral lifestyle, which Joseph had arranged for them with Pharaoh, the reunion between Jacob and his long-lost son was a scene of overwhelming emotion. Joseph had his chariot made ready and went to Goshen to meet his father Israel. As soon as Joseph appeared before him, he threw his arms around his father and wept for a long time. Israel said to Joseph, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." The ache of 2 decades of grief was finally soothed, replaced by an immeasurable joy. Joseph then presented 5 of his brothers, and later his father, to Pharaoh. Pharaoh, impressed by Jacob's venerable age and pleased with Joseph's family, officially granted them the land of Goshen to settle in. "The land of Egypt is before you," Pharaoh said to Joseph. "Settle your father and your brothers in the best part of the land. Let them live in Goshen. And if you know of any among them with special ability, put them in charge of my own livestock." Thus, the people of Israel settled in Egypt, in the region of Goshen. They acquired property there and were fruitful and increased greatly in number, a small pocket of Hebrew life thriving within the mighty Egyptian empire, protected and provided for by the son who had once been sold as a slave. The years of famine passed, but the Israelites remained in Goshen, their numbers swelling, a testament to God's promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, a people being nurtured and multiplied in a foreign land, unknowingly awaiting the next chapter in their unfolding, divinely guided destiny. Years melted into decades, and decades into centuries. Joseph, the wise vizier who had saved Egypt and preserved his own people, eventually died, as did all of his brothers and that entire generation. The 70 souls who had journeyed with Jacob into the fertile plains of Goshen, seeking refuge from famine, had indeed been fruitful and multiplied exceedingly. They became so numerous and strong that the land of Goshen teemed with their descendants, the Israelites. Their distinctive customs, their worship of the one unseen God, and their sheer numbers began to set them apart from the Egyptian populace. Then, a new king, one who did not know Joseph, ascended to the throne of Egypt. The memory of Joseph's monumental contributions, the favor he had found with the previous pharaoh, had faded with the passage of time. This new pharaoh, his heart filled with suspicion and a cold, calculating pragmatism, looked upon the burgeoning Israelite population not as a blessing, but as a potential threat. "Look," he said to his officials, his voice laced with distrust and a simmering fear, "the Israelites have become far too numerous and too powerful for us. If war breaks out, they might join our enemies, fight against us, and then escape from the country. We must act shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous." And so, with a sudden, brutal efficiency, the Pharaoh commanded the enslavement of the Israelites. Taskmasters were appointed over them to oppress them with forced labor. The transition was swift and cruel. The Israelites, who had once lived in relative prosperity and peace, found themselves stripped of their freedoms, their dignity trampled under the weight of a heavy, merciless yoke. They were forced to build massive storage cities for Pharaoh, Pithom and Ramses, their days filled with the back-breaking toil of making bricks from mud and straw, hauling heavy stones, and laboring in the scorching Egyptian sun under the constant threat of the overseer's lash. Faster, The Egyptian taskmasters would shout, their whips slicing through the air, often finding their mark on weary flesh. There is no rest for slaves. The cries of the Israelites, once songs of pastoral life, now became groans of exhaustion and pain. Yet, the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread, a testament to God's enduring promise. This only alarmed Pharaoh further. His cruelty escalated. He issued a secret, horrifying decree to the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah. When you are helping the Hebrew women during childbirth on the delivery stool, if you see that the baby is a boy, kill him, but if it is a girl, let her live. But the midwives, fearing God more than Pharaoh, did not do as the king of Egypt had commanded them. They let the boys live. When Pharaoh summoned them and demanded an explanation, they cleverly replied, "Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive." God was kind to the midwives, and the people continued to increase and become even more numerous. Frustrated and enraged by the failure of his covert plan, Pharaoh then issued a public chilling order to all his people. "Every Hebrew boy that is born you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live." A pall of terror fell over the Israelite households. The joy of childbirth was now overshadowed by the horrifying prospect of infanticide. It was during this dark and oppressive time that a Levite man and a Levite woman married, and she conceived and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, a beautiful baby, her mother's heart, filled with fierce, protective love, rebelled against Pharaoh's cruel edict. She hid him for 3 months, but when she could hide him no longer, knowing the risk of discovery grew daily, she devised a desperate plan. With a heavy heart, she took a papyrus basket, coated it with tar and pitch to make it waterproof, and placed her precious child inside. Then, with tears streaming down her face, she laid the basket among the reeds along the bank of the Nile, the very river designated as his tomb. The baby's older sister, Miriam, stood at a distance, her young heart pounding with anxiety to see what would happen to him. As fate, or rather divine providence, would have it, Pharaoh's own daughter came down to the Nile to bathe, accompanied by her attendants. As she walked along the riverbank, she noticed the basket among the reeds. Curiosity piqued, she sent her female slave to retrieve it. Opening it, she saw the baby, and he was crying. Her heart was moved with compassion. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she exclaimed, lifting the child with a surprising tenderness. At that moment, Miriam, seeing her opportunity, bravely approached. "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" she asked. "Yes, go," the princess replied. So the girl went and got the baby's own mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." Moses, the Hebrew child, condemned to die, grew up in the opulent splendor of the Egyptian palace, educated as a prince, privy to the knowledge and power of the Egyptian court. Yet, despite his privileged upbringing, he never forgot his roots, the whispers of his true heritage likely reaching him through his nurse, his own mother. One day, when he had grown to manhood, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian taskmaster mercilessly beating a Hebrew slave, one of his kinsmen. A sudden consuming rage, a righteous indignation mixed with a lifetime of suppressed identity surged through him. "Stop!" he yelled, and in a fit of uncontrolled anger, he struck the Egyptian and killed him, then quickly looked around and buried him in the sand. The next day, he went out again and saw 2 Hebrews fighting. He tried to intervene, asking the one in the wrong, "Why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew?" But the man, resentful of his interference, retorted, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian?" Moses was terrified. His deed was known. Realizing his life was now in peril, that Pharaoh would surely seek his execution, Moses fled from Egypt. He journeyed far into the desert, to the land of Midian, a fugitive from justice, his princely life exchanged for that of an exile. There, by a well, he defended the daughters of Jethro, a priest of Midian, from aggressive shepherds, and was subsequently welcomed into Jethro's household, eventually marrying his daughter Zipporah. For 40 years, Moses lived as a shepherd in the quiet solitude of the Midianite wilderness, tending Jethro's flocks. The fiery passions of his youth, tempered by the harsh beauty and profound silence of the desert. The plight of his people in Egypt, though distant, must have remained a heavy weight upon his heart. Years of unrelenting slavery wore on the Israelites. Exhausted, broken-spirited, and desperate, their groans and cries under the crushing weight of their bondage finally ascended to God. "Save us, Lord," they cried out from the depths of their despair. "Deliver us from this unbearable oppression." And God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. He looked down upon the Israelites and was concerned about them. The time for their deliverance was drawing near. One day, as Moses was tending his flock on the far side of the wilderness, he led them to Horeb, the mountain of God. There, a sight both strange and awe-inspiring arrested his attention. An angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. "I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up," Moses thought, approaching cautiously. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, "Moses, Moses." Startled and awestruck, Moses replied, "Here I am. Do not come any closer," God said from within the burning, unconsumed bush, his voice resonating with a holy power that made the very ground seem to tremble. "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." Then he said, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." At this, Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, "I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now, go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people the Israelites out of Egypt." Moses, the shepherd who had spent 4 decades in the quiet obscurity of the desert, the fugitive prince who had long since abandoned any illusions of grandeur, was stunned. "Who am I?" he stammered, his voice filled with doubt and a profound sense of inadequacy. "That I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" He, who had once acted impulsively in striking down an Egyptian, now felt utterly overwhelmed by the magnitude of this divine commission. But God assured him, "I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain." Moses, still hesitant, raised further objections. "What if they ask your name? What if they don't believe me? I am slow of speech and tongue." To each objection, God provided an answer, revealing his sacred name, "I am who I am," empowering Moses with miraculous signs and appointing his eloquent brother Aaron to be his spokesman. Reluctantly, yet compelled by the divine presence, Moses, following the divine command, returned to Egypt. He and Aaron confronted Pharaoh, the powerful ruler of the Egyptian empire, with courage born of their divine backing. "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, 'Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness,'" Moses declared. His voice, though perhaps still lacking natural eloquence, now carried the authority of the Almighty. Pharaoh, his heart hardened by pride and a callous disregard for the suffering of his slaves, scoffed. "Who is the Lord, that I should obey him and let Israel go?" he replied, with a cold, dismissive stare. "I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." In fact, he increased their burdens, ordering them to make the same quota of bricks, but without being supplied with straw, forcing them to gather it themselves. Then began the terrifying and relentless series of plagues. Divine judgments poured out upon Egypt to demonstrate God's power and break Pharaoh's stubborn will. The waters of the mighty Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt, turned to blood. Fish died, and a putrid stench filled the land. Swarms of frogs, then gnats, then flies, invaded the houses, sowing chaos and misery. Livestock died. Boils afflicted the people, and devastating hail mingled with fire rained down from the sky, destroying crops and killing those caught unsheltered. A plague of locusts consumed what little the hail had left, and then a palpable, oppressive darkness, a darkness that could be felt, enveloped Egypt for 3 days, a terrifying precursor to the final, most devastating judgment. After each plague, Pharaoh would temporarily relent, imploring Moses to plead with your God to stop this. But as soon as the plague ceased, his heart would harden once more, his defiance renewed. There will be one final plague. Moses warned, his voice heavy with the gravity of the impending doom. The death of the firstborn in every Egyptian household, from the firstborn son of Pharaoh, who sits on the throne, to the firstborn son of the female slave, who is at her handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle as well. God then instructed the Israelites on the Passover to slaughter a lamb without defect, to paint its blood on the doorposts and lintels of their homes, and to eat the roasted lamb with unleavened bread and bitter herbs, dressed and ready to leave. That night, in the impenetrable darkness, the angel of death passed through Egypt. A great cry of anguish arose throughout the land as families awoke to find their firstborn lifeless. But in the homes marked with the lamb's blood, the angel passed over. Broken by grief and terror, Pharaoh finally summoned Moses and Aaron in the night. "Go," he shouted, his voice hoarse with despair. "Leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go, worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds, as you have said, and go. And also bless me." And so, after 430 years in Egypt, the Israelites, numbering approximately 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children, a vast multitude likely exceeding 2 million people, set out under the leadership of Moses. They plundered the Egyptians who, eager to be rid of them, gave them articles of silver and gold and clothing. Moses led them towards the Red Sea, but soon Pharaoh's fickle heart changed yet again. Regretting the loss of his massive slave labor force, he commanded, "Harness my chariot and take my army with you." And the elite war chariots of Egypt, the most formidable military machine of its time, thundered in pursuit. Trapped between the advancing Egyptian army and the impassable waters of the Red Sea, the Israelites despaired. "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die?" They cried out to Moses, their voices raw with fear and accusation. "What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt?" "Do not be afraid," Moses responded, his own faith a beacon in their terror. "Stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Then, as Moses raised his staff at God's command, a strong east wind blew all night, and miraculously the sea parted. The waters were driven back, forming towering walls on either side, and a path of dry ground emerged through the heart of the sea. "Forward," Moses commanded, and the people, their fear momentarily replaced by a stunned awe, crossed on the seabed. The Egyptian army, relentless in their pursuit, charged into the parted sea after them. As the last Israelite reached the other side, Moses, again at God's command, stretched out his hand over the sea. The waters, which had stood like liquid ramparts, rushed back to their place, engulfing the pursuing chariots and soldiers in a torrent of divine judgment. The pride of Egypt, its mighty army, was utterly destroyed. Now truly free, the people of Israel, led by Miriam, Moses' sister, celebrated with songs and dances. "Sing to the Lord," they rejoiced, "for he is highly exalted. Both horse and driver he has hurled into the sea." The journey through the vast, inhospitable Sinai desert began, bringing with it new trials and a continuous testing of their faith. Water was scarce, and hunger plagued them. "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt," they complained, their memories conveniently forgetting the bitterness of slavery. "There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." Yet God's provision was unfailing. Moses, crying out to God, witnessed water spring forth from a rock at Horeb and later at Meribah. And manna, the bread of heaven, a mysterious, sweet substance, covered the ground each morning, sustaining them through their wanderings. Quail were miraculously provided when they craved meat. At the foot of Mount Sinai, a place shrouded in smoke, thunder, and lightning, God delivered his law to Moses, including the 10 Commandments, etching them onto stone tablets. "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery," he declared from the cloud of glory. "You shall have no other gods before me." The people, trembling with awe and fear, agreed to the covenant, promising to obey. Yet, their commitment was fragile. While Moses was on the mountain receiving further instructions, the people, impatient and fearful, persuaded Aaron to craft a golden calf, proclaiming, "These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." God's wrath flared, and he threatened to destroy them. But Moses interceded passionately, pleading for mercy. "Forgive their sin, Lord," he begged, "but if not, then blot me out of the book you have written." Mercy prevailed, though the instigators were punished, and the journey continued. A relentless cycle of rebellion and forgiveness, provision and judgment. Years of wandering in the desert, a consequence of their disbelief and disobedience when they first neared the promised land and refused to enter, were arduous. A new generation arose, one that had not known slavery in Egypt, but had witnessed God's power and patience in the wilderness. At last, after 40 long years, they reached the border of Canaan, the land promised to their ancestors. Moses, now old and weary, his life's work nearly complete, looked out at his people from Mount Nebo, gazing across the Jordan River to the fertile land he himself would not enter. "I will not cross with you," he said, his voice filled with a profound emotion. "Joshua, son of Nun, will lead you. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you." With those words, Moses, the reluctant prophet, the mighty leader, the faithful servant of God, bid farewell to the people he had guided for so long. The people of Israel mourned him, and then, under the new leadership of Joshua, they prepared to finally seize the land that God had promised, a land flowing with milk and honey, a destiny generations in the making.